Clay Thompson had lived on the wide, open land of the desert ranch for most of his life. He knew every corner of it, every dusty trail, every quiet rock where lizards warmed themselves under the sun. He also knew the winds, how they changed direction before a storm, and how the air became still when something unusual was about to happen. That afternoon, the heat lay heavy over the ground like a thick blanket. Even the cattle were quiet, hiding in whatever shade they could find. Clay was fixing the old wooden fence that separated the open range from his cattle pastures. The fence had been broken by a storm the night before. A few posts had cracked, and a section of wire had snapped loose. Clay worked steadily, hammering new nails, pulling the wire tight, and wiping sweat from his brow every few minutes. He tried not to think about the long walk back to his cabin, but he also knew the work had to be done. Ranch life didn't allow delays. As he reached the last post, something caught his attention. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement slow. Unsteady movement from the far side of the mesquite bushes. At first, he thought it might be a deer or maybe a stray calf. But when he looked more closely, he realized it was a person. A woman. She stood a short distance away, barely keeping her balance. The sunlight behind her made it difficult to see her clearly. But her clothes and features showed she was Apache. Clay straightened up, surprised. Apache people lived not far from his ranch, but they didn't usually come onto his land unless there was a reason. He wiped his hands on his jeans, trying to appear calm and respectful. He didn't want her to think he was a threat. She took one step forward, then another, each step slower than the last. Her long dark hair hung over her shoulders, and her face looked pale, almost gray. She was breathing hard, and her eyes seemed unfocused, as though she were fighting to stay alert. Clay took a few cautious steps toward her. "Ma'am?" he said gently. "Are you all right?" She didn't answer. Instead, she swayed a little, as if the ground under her feet had become uneven. Clay stopped where he was, not wanting to alarm her. He raised his hands slightly to show he meant no harm. "My name's Clay," he said. "Clay Thompson. I live just over that ridge. Do you need help?" The woman blinked slowly, as if the words took time to reach her. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a weak sound came out. Then, without warning, her knees buckled. Clay rushed forward just in time to catch her before she hit the hot sand. He held her carefully, trying to keep her steady. She was light but trembling. Her skin felt warmer than it should have been. He knelt with her in his arms and tried again to get her attention. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open for a second, and she whispered something so faint he almost missed it. "Snake." Clay's heart tightened. A snake bite out here in this heat could be deadly if not treated quickly. He scanned the area around them, looking for signs of danger. There were no snakes in sight now, but that didn't matter. The damage had already been done. "What happened?" he asked softly. She tried to speak again but winced in pain. He could see she was struggling to breathe normally, her chest rising quickly, then unevenly. Snake venom could cause that. He had to act fast. He shifted her gently so she could rest against his arm. She looked at him with fear, not fear of him, but fear of her situation, fear of what the bite might do to her. He could see it in her eyes. "Where's the wound?" Clay asked. "I need to see it so I can help you." The woman shook her head slightly. Her lips pressed together as though she wanted to answer but was afraid. Clay didn't push her. He knew enough about the Apache to understand that modesty and cultural boundaries were deeply respected. She didn't want a stranger, especially a man from outside her tribe, to see her injury. But she also didn't have much time. "I won't do anything you don't want," Clay said in a calm voice. "I just want to help." She swallowed slowly, trying to gather strength. Then she whispered again, clearer this time. "Leg, upper, underskirt." Clay felt the seriousness of the moment. The snake had bitten her in a place she didn't want exposed. That meant she had likely tried to walk away instead of asking for help. Even though walking only made injuries worse, she had probably traveled far, forcing herself forward despite pain and fear. Clay felt a deep respect for her strength, but also concern. "You're hurt bad," he said softly. "If I don't treat the bite soon, The venom will spread more. The woman closed her eyes tightly, as if fighting an inner battle. Clay waited, letting her decide. He didn't want to pressure her. Finally, after several seconds, she gave a small nod. A nod filled with fear, trust, and desperation. Clay lifted her carefully and carried her toward the shade of a nearby mesquite tree. The tree's branches gave a little relief from the burning sun. He laid her down gently on a patch of soft sand. She breathed out slowly, the shade already helping her feel slightly cooler. He knelt beside her. "My hands are clean," he said quietly, showing them to her. "I'll be careful." She nodded again, though her eyes stayed closed this time. Her breathing was still uneven. Clay knew he didn't have much time left. He had treated snake bites before on cattle, on horses, even once on himself, but treating a person was different. It required more care and more understanding, especially when dealing with someone from a different culture. He spoke softly as he worked, hoping his voice would calm her. "I'm going to look at the wound now. If you want me to stop at any time, just say so." She did not speak, but she moved her hand slightly, giving him silent permission. Clay gently adjusted the fabric enough to find the injury without exposing more than necessary. When he finally saw the wound, he felt a heavy worry settle in his chest. The bite was swollen, and the skin around it had darkened. It was a clear sign the venom had been spreading for some time. "You were brave to walk this far," he said quietly. "But the bite needs attention fast." Her eyes opened just a little, showing exhaustion and pain. "I tried to reach home," she whispered. Clay understood. She had hoped to reach her people for help, but hadn't made it. He worked quickly but carefully. He tied a piece of cloth above the bite to slow the spread of venom, not too tight, just enough to reduce circulation. He cleaned the area gently with water from his canteen. The woman winced but did not pull away. She trusted him now, even though they had met only moments ago. As he worked, he kept talking to her, so she wouldn't drift into unconsciousness. "What's your name?" she breathed weakly. "Nalin." He repeated it softly. "Nalin. That's a strong name." Her eyes opened, just barely, as if the simple recognition gave her a small measure of comfort. Clay continued cleaning the wound and checked her pulse. It was fast, too fast. Venom worked quickly in this heat. He needed to keep her awake until he could get her to a safer place. "We're going to get through this," he said calmly. "You're not alone." Nalin looked at him with tired eyes. She didn't speak this time, but the look itself said something like a quiet acceptance that she had placed her life in the hands of a stranger. Clay lifted her gently again, knowing he needed to take her closer to his ranch where he had supplies and shade. The sun was still high, and the desert heat was intense. Every minute mattered. He placed her over his arm in the safest and most comfortable position he could manage. Her breathing was shallow but steady. He walked toward his horse, which stood under the same mesquite tree, waiting patiently. "This is going to be a rough ride," he told her softly, "but I'll make it as easy as I can." She did not answer, but her fingers curled slightly against his sleeve, holding on. Clay secured her on the horse, climbed up behind her, and wrapped one arm around her to support her. Then he urged the horse forward, heading toward his ranch house. He didn't look back at the fence, the tools, or the broken wood he had been working on. None of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was getting Nalin to safety before the sun grew hotter or the venom spread further. As the horse moved across the dusty ground, Clay kept glancing down at her. Her head rested lightly against his chest, and her breathing came in slow, uneven rhythms. He spoke to her every few seconds, encouraging her to stay awake, to keep fighting, to hold on just a little longer. And all the while, the desert wind moved around them, warm, dry, and heavy, carrying with it the silent knowledge that life in this land could change in one moment. With one unexpected encounter, Nalin had appeared out of nowhere, a stranger on his land, but now her life depended on him, and Clay, feeling a deep responsibility settle over him, tightened his hold on her slightly, guiding the horse faster as the shadows grew longer. The sun continued to burn overhead, but Clay rode forward, determined not to let the desert claim another life. Clay reached the ranch just as the sun began sliding lower in the sky. The heat still clung to the air, but there was a faint breeze now, carrying the dry smell of dust and grass. His horse slowed to a stop near the front of the small wooden house. Clay carefully helped Nalin down, making sure she stayed upright. She leaned against him weakly, her legs trembling as though they could barely hold her weight. "You're all right," Clay said softly. "We're here now." Nalin nodded faintly, though her eyes remained half-closed. He could see how tired she was. Her breathing still came unevenly, and her face had grown even paler than before. Clay guided her into the house, one slow step at a time. His cabin was simple, a small table, a few chairs, shelves filled with supplies, and a narrow bed in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was clean and cool compared to the harsh sun outside. Clay led Nalin to the bed and helped her sit down gently. She closed her eyes, breathing with difficulty. Clay knelt in front of her, watching her closely. "We need to check the wound again," he told her in a calm voice. "The venom is spreading faster than I hoped." Nalin opened her eyes just slightly, a look of worry passing through them. She knew what he meant, but the moment she realized he would need to uncover the wound again, she tensed. Clay noticed it immediately. "I understand this is hard," he said gently. "I'll only do what is necessary. Nothing more." She looked down, her fingers twisting weakly in the fabric of her skirt. She wanted to trust him, but her culture had taught her strict boundaries. To let a man who was not from her people see her injury felt wrong to her, even in such an urgent moment. Yet the pain in her leg grew stronger, spreading upward, and she knew she didn't have time to hesitate. Clay sat back slightly to give her space. "Nalin," he said softly, "you're strong. You walked far with this injury, but now you need help. If you don't let me treat it fully, the venom might reach your heart." Her eyes widened with fear, and her breathing quickened. Clay immediately shook his head. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just want you to understand the danger we're facing." For a long moment, Nalin sat still, fighting an internal struggle. She wasn't afraid of Clay, she was afraid of dishonoring her traditions. But she was also afraid of losing her life. She pressed her lips together tightly, thinking of her family, her tribe, the people waiting for her to return. She could not let herself be lost to the desert. After several quiet seconds, she gave a small nod. Clay saw the decision in her eyes. She had chosen survival. "All right," he said gently. "We'll take this slow. Just breathe." She didn't speak, but her hand rested on his sleeve for a moment. A silent gesture that said she trusted him. Clay brought clean cloth, water, and a small jar of salve, made from herbs he had learned to use years ago. He always kept healing supplies ready. Living in the desert meant accidents could happen at any time. As he prepared the items, he spoke to Nalin in a steady voice. "I'll do everything with respect," he said. "If you want me to stop, just tell me." She nodded again, though her eyes were closed now, as if gathering the courage she needed. He knelt beside the bed and carefully adjusted the fabric around the wound area, just enough to clean and treat it. He did not expose more than necessary, and kept his actions focused, gentle, and professional. When he finally saw the bite again, he felt a deep concern. The swelling had grown. The area around the wound was dark and hot. She must have been walking for hours with the venom spreading inside her. Clay dipped a cloth into water and cleaned the skin carefully. Nalin winced, gripping the edge of the blanket tightly, but she didn't pull away. "You're doing great," he told her softly. "Just a little longer." She breathed out a shaky sigh. Clay continued cleaning, working quickly but with care. He had to slow the venom and keep the wound from worsening. He checked her pulse. It was fast, but not as fast as before. That was a relief. When he applied a cooling salve around the bite, Nalin opened her eyes slightly and looked at him. There was pain in her expression, but also gratitude. She could see he wasn't trying to take advantage of her vulnerability. His hands moved only where they needed to, and his eyes stayed focused on his work, never wandering. Clay felt her watching him and offered a small smile. "You're safe here," he said. Nalin didn't smile back. She was too weak, but her eyes softened, and that was enough. Once the salve was applied, he wrapped the wound with clean bandages. The swelling was still worrying, but at least the venom would slow down now. He sat back and let out a quiet breath. "I'm going to make some herbal tea," he said, standing up. "It'll help with the pain and keep you awake." Nalin nodded faintly. Clay moved to the small stove and heated water. The cabin grew quiet, except for the soft sound of boiling water and Nalin's slow, uneven breaths. Clay mixed herbs into the hot water plants he had learned from old ranchers and nearby tribes, something he respected deeply. He returned with the warm cup and held it out. "It's not strong, but it'll help." She tried to lift the cup, but her hand shook too much. Clay gently supported her hand, helping her drink without spilling. She sipped slowly, her breathing calming a little. After a few minutes, she managed a quiet whisper. "I did not want to trouble your land." Clay shook his head immediately. "You didn't trouble anything. You needed help. I'm glad I was there." She closed her eyes again, comforted by his honesty. Clay sat beside her bed in a wooden chair, keeping watch. He didn't want her to sleep too deeply yet. Venom sometimes made people faint, and he needed her conscious. So he began talking gently, telling simple stories about growing up on the ranch, about the horses, about how peaceful the desert could be at night when the stars spread across the sky. Nalin listened, even if her eyes stayed closed. His voice seemed to calm her nerves. Every few minutes, he asked her a small question, just enough to keep her awake. "What were you doing out there today?" he asked softly. She opened her eyes a little. "Gathering herbs. For an elder." Clay nodded. "You must care about your people a lot." She nodded weakly. "My responsibility." Clay respected that deeply. She was strong, and she also carried duties within her tribe. It explained why she had kept walking even after being bitten. She didn't want to fail the task she had been given. After some time, he saw her breathing ease a little. The tea was helping, and the bandages were doing their job. But he knew she wasn't out of danger yet. "We'll need to wait for your people," Clay said quietly. "They'll know more about treating this." Nalin looked worried for a moment. "They will be angry that you had to help." Clay shook his head. "They can be upset with me if they want. What matters is, you're alive." For the first time, Nalin gave the smallest hint of a smile. It was faint, barely there, but it showed she understood his sincerity. The evening light entered the cabin in soft golden rays, making the room feel warm but peaceful. Clay checked her wound again. The swelling had stopped increasing. That was a good sign. He dipped a cloth in cool water and gently touched it to her forehead. She relaxed a little, enjoying the relief. Clay kept speaking to her, not wanting her to slip into deep sleep. "Just stay with me a little longer," he said. Her eyes fluttered open and closed. She was fighting the exhaustion, but his calm voice helped. Time passed slowly. Clay didn't leave her side once. He watched her breathing, her pulse, the color of her face. He knew this night would be long, but he was ready for it. He felt a strange connection forming, not a romantic one, but a human bond, built from trust, danger, and the simple act of helping someone in need. Nalin finally whispered again. "Why help me so much?" Clay leaned forward slightly. "Because life is precious," he said softly. "And because you were alone out there. No one deserves to face something like that alone." She looked at him for a moment, her eyes glistening with something emotional. "Gratitude, relief, maybe both. You are a good man," she whispered. Clay shook his head modestly. "Just doing what anyone should." The light faded, and the cabin grew dim. Clay lit a lantern to keep the room bright. Nalin rested quietly, her breathing steadier now. She wasn't healed yet, but she was far from where she had been hours before. Clay sat back in the chair, watching over her with a steady, protective calm. Outside, the desert wind whispered softly, and far in the distance, a single coyote called into the dusk. Inside the small cabin, a fragile sense of safety settled over them both. Night settled slowly over the desert, spreading a deep blue color across the sky. The heat of the day faded little by little, replaced by a cool breeze that slipped through the cracks of Clay's small cabin. Inside, the soft light of a lantern flickered gently, casting warm shadows on the wooden walls. Clay sat beside Nalin, keeping careful watch. He had been alert for hours, making sure she did not fall unconscious for too long. Her breathing was more steady now, but the danger had not passed. Snake venom sometimes acted quietly, slowing down only to strike harder later. Clay knew this too well. Nalin lay still, her eyes half open. She was tired from pain, tired from walking in the heat, tired from fighting something she could not see. But she stayed awake because Clay kept speaking to her in a calm, steady voice. "You're strong," he told her quietly. "Most people wouldn't have made it this far." She blinked slowly, as if acknowledging his words. It was hard for her to speak, but she tried anyway. "I walked for many hours. I thought I could reach my people." Clay nodded. "You were close. The border of your land isn't too far from here." Nalin swallowed carefully. "I didn't want them to worry. The elder needed the herbs. I thought I could finish my task." Clay felt a deep respect for her determination. Even in pain, she had thought of her people first. "You're brave," he said. "But you should have asked for help sooner." She looked at him for a moment, tired eyes meeting his. "I didn't want to trouble anyone." Clay smiled faintly. "You aren't trouble. And helping someone in need isn't a burden." Nalin didn't answer, but her expression softened slightly. It felt good to know someone believed that. The hours passed slowly. Clay checked the bandage again, gently touching her leg around the wound. The swelling had stopped growing, but the skin was still warm. He reapplied a little of the herbal salve. Nalin winced, gripping the blanket, but her face relaxed after a moment. "It's working," Clay said gently. "Your body is fighting the venom." Nalin took a deep breath, feeling a small wave of relief. Clay stood up and moved toward the fireplace. He added a small piece of wood, enough to keep the room warm. The crackle of the fire comforted them both. Nalin watched him quietly. Even though she barely knew him, she felt safe in his presence. There was something steady and honest about him, something strong, like the land he lived on. Clay poured more water into a kettle and prepared another small cup of herbal tea. When it was ready, he returned to her side and helped her take a sip. "I'm sorry," Nalin whispered suddenly. Clay blinked in surprise. "Sorry? For what?" "For making you stop your work. For bringing trouble to your house. For needing help." Clay shook his head firmly. "You don't need to apologize for being hurt. Anyone would have done the same if they saw you like that." Nalin stared at him for a long moment, as if studying his words. Then she closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Clay sat down again. "You're welcome." Silence settled between them for a while. A peaceful silence that didn't feel heavy or uncomfortable. Outside, the desert night became alive, with soft sounds, the chirping of insects, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of wind through the dry grass. The world outside felt big, but inside the small cabin, it felt like time had slowed down to protect them. Clay checked her pulse again. It was slower now, more even, a good sign. "I think you're past the worst of it," he said softly. Nalin opened her eyes. "Will I be all right?" Clay nodded. "You will. You just need rest. And we need to keep you hydrated." She sighed quietly, her body relaxing in relief. But after a moment, her face filled with worry again. "My people. They don't know where I am," she whispered. "They might think something bad happened." Clay sat back, thinking. "Do they usually search for someone quickly?" "Yes," she answered weakly. "They look for anyone who doesn't return before night." Clay nodded. "Then they might already be nearby." Nalin looked toward the small window. "I don't want them to fear you, or misunderstand." Clay understood her worry. Her tribe might think he had harmed her or acted in a disrespectful way. But he wasn't afraid of their reaction. He cared more about her safety than anything else. "They'll know the truth when they see how you're doing," he said calmly. Nalan took a slow breath, trusting his words. Clay continued to watch over her, checking her temperature, giving her small sips of water, and adjusting her blanket to keep her comfortable. His movements were patient, gentle, and thoughtful, nothing rushed, nothing careless. As midnight approached, Nalan felt a wave of sleepiness wash over her. Her body was exhausted, but at least she wasn't fighting the venom as fiercely now. "You can sleep," Clay told her softly. "I'll be right here." She opened her eyes just enough to see him sitting beside her, lantern light glowing behind him like a halo. "Clay," she whispered. "Yes? You saved my life." Clay smiled slightly, shaking his head. "No. You saved yourself by not giving up. I just helped a little." But Nalan knew better. Without him, she would have collapsed in the desert and never risen again. Slowly, her eyes closed, and her breathing settled into a gentle rhythm. Clay watched her for a while, making sure she was stable. Only when he was certain she was safe did he allow himself to take a deeper breath. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Every few minutes, he checked her pulse, her breathing, and the warmth of her skin. The night felt long, but Clay didn't mind. This responsibility felt natural to him. Hours passed. The fire grew smaller. The lantern dimmed. The desert outside grew quiet. Then, sometime just before dawn, Clay heard a soft sound outside the cabin, a horse's hoof brushing lightly against the sand. He stood immediately, alert. Another sound followed. Then another. Clay walked to the door quietly, opened it, and looked out. Under the faint early light of the sky, he saw shapes moving on the horizon, several riders approaching slowly. Torches flickered in their hands, glowing like fireflies in the blue morning air. Nalan's people had arrived. Clay stepped back inside and closed the door gently. He didn't want Nalan to feel frightened if she woke up suddenly. Instead, he returned to her side and placed a reassuring hand on the edge of the bed. Soon, there was a knock, firm but respectful. Clay took a breath and opened the door. Outside stood a group of Apache men and women, including an elder with gray hair tied neatly behind him. Their faces held worry and caution. When they saw Clay, they grew tense, unsure of his intentions. The elder stepped forward. "We are searching for Nalan," he said in a deep, steady voice. She did not return. Clay nodded calmly. "She's inside. She was bitten by a snake. I helped her." The group stiffened slightly. They exchanged glances, uncertain of what they would find inside Clay's home. Clay stepped aside. "You can see her." They entered quietly. When they saw Nalan lying safely on the bed, wrapped in clean blankets, breathing peacefully, their expressions softened with relief. One of the women hurried to her side. "Nalan, you're alive!" Nalan stirred at the sound of familiar voices. Slowly, she opened her eyes. When she saw her people, she tried to sit up, but Clay gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Easy," he said softly. The elder approached, his face full of concern. "Child, you walked too far alone." Nalan looked at Clay, then at her people. Her voice was weak but clear. "I tried to bring the herbs. The snake bit me. Clay saved me." Her words hung in the air, full of truth and gratitude. The Apache elder looked at Clay for a long moment. His expression wasn't hostile, it was thoughtful. Slowly, he nodded. "You showed respect," the elder said quietly. "And you saved her life." Clay dipped his head modestly. Anyone would have done the same, but the elder knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would put aside fear, cultural differences, and risk to help someone in such a vulnerable situation. Nalan reached out her hand slightly, her eyes meeting Clay's. There was a deep understanding between them now, a connection built not by words, but by courage, trust, and a moment where his kindness met her need. Clay felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He had done what he believed was right, and seeing her safe among her people made every long hour worth it. Outside, the first rays of sunlight crept over the desert horizon, painting the land with soft gold. A long night had ended, and a new sense of trust had begun. When the sun rose the next morning, the sky over the open land was soft and golden. The long night had finally ended, and the cool air carried a quiet calm. Ethan stepped outside the small cabin to take a deep breath. He had barely slept because he kept checking on Tala through the night. Even with the worry, he felt thankful. She was still breathing, and that alone gave him strength. He looked out toward the distant hills. The world felt wide and peaceful again, unlike the fear he had felt the day before when he first saw Tala collapse. Life could change in a moment. He had learned that again. Now, the only thing that mattered was helping her recover fully. Inside the cabin, Tala slowly woke up. Her eyelids felt heavy, but the pain that had once burned through her leg was now softer. She looked around the quiet room and saw the wooden beams above her. She could hear the soft sound of a pot simmering on the stove and the wind brushing past the windows. For a moment, she wondered if everything that happened yesterday was real. Then she saw her leg, carefully wrapped in clean cloth, and she remembered the rancher, Ethan, who had helped her when no one else was around. She tried to sit up, and her breath trembled from the effort. Ethan heard the slight movement and rushed inside at once. "You're awake," he said with relief, stepping closer. "How are you feeling?" She met his eyes and gave a small nod. "Better. Because of you." Ethan shook his head gently. "You're strong. You fought hard. I just did what anyone should have done." Tala looked at him with calm honesty. Not everyone would help a stranger. Not everyone helps people who are not from their own group. "You did." Her words stayed with him for a moment. He had lived alone for years, keeping his distance from others. Yet yesterday, when he found Tala in danger, he had acted without hesitation. Maybe it was because something inside him knew it was right. Maybe it was because he had seen courage in her eyes, even in pain. Or maybe it was simply because he was tired of living with walls around his heart. He walked to the stove, poured warm herbal tea into a cup, and brought it to her. "Drink this slowly. It will help your strength." Tala took it carefully. The warmth of the cup eased her fingers. She sipped and felt the warmth flow through her tired body. For the first time since the incident, she felt a moment of comfort. Ethan sat nearby so she wouldn't feel alone. "If you need anything, just tell me," he said. She nodded again. "Thank you." The morning passed quietly. Ethan cleaned the small cabin, cooked simple food, and checked her bandage. Tala rested, gathering her strength. Each hour, she felt a little more aware, a little more alive. By midday, she tried standing for a few seconds. Ethan was by her side, steadying her gently so she didn't fall. "You're healing," he said with a soft smile. "It will take time," she replied. "But yes, the pain is less now." Ethan noticed something in her eyes, gratitude, yes, but also a spark of bravery that made him feel humble. She had been through something frightening, yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. "Do you want to sit outside for some fresh air?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I would like that." He helped her walk carefully to the wooden bench outside the cabin. The sun was warm but gentle, and the wide land stretched endlessly around them. Birds flew overhead, and the breeze carried the scent of dry grass and earth. Tala took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. "Your land is peaceful," she said. "It's quiet," Ethan replied. "Sometimes too quiet. But I've grown used to it." "Silence can be healing," she said softly. They sat side by side, not speaking for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't feel heavy, only natural. After a few minutes, Tala looked at him. "Yesterday, when you found me, I thought I would not live. I felt everything fading." Ethan glanced at her gently. "You were in a bad state. I'm glad I got to you in time." She looked down at her hands. "In my tribe, we believe that every person meets others for a reason. Sometimes the reason is simple. Sometimes the reason is life-changing. I think meeting you has meaning." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond at first. He wasn't used to emotional conversations. But he didn't want to brush her words aside, because something inside him agreed with her. "I think it has meaning too," he said quietly. The wind carried their words across the grass. As the afternoon sun shifted, Ethan prepared a simple meal and brought it outside for both of them. Tala ate slowly, but she finished more than he expected. Healing required strength, and she knew she needed every bit of nourishment. "You don't have to stay here all day," she said gently. "I don't want to take your time." Ethan shook his head. "You're not taking anything from me. I'm right where I should be." Tala held his gaze for a moment. She could see sincerity in his expression, something she deeply respected. As the day went on, she shared stories about her tribe, her childhood, and the traditions she grew up with. Ethan listened with full attention, absorbing every detail. He rarely had the chance to learn about people outside his own world. In return, he shared pieces of his life, how he lived alone on the ranch, how the quiet helped him, but also sometimes made him feel distant from the world. Tala listened with understanding. She didn't judge him. She simply accepted his words. Evening came, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Ethan helped her inside and changed her bandage again. The wound was healing well. "You're getting better faster than I expected," he told her. "I feel stronger today," she said. After a moment, she looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "When I can walk properly, I must return to my people. They will be worried." Ethan knew this moment would come, but hearing it still caused a soft ache inside him. He had grown used to her presence, her calmness, her honesty, her strength. The cabin felt brighter with her in it. "Of course," he said, "I'll make sure you're strong enough for the journey." Tala sensed the emotion he was trying to hide. "You have a kind heart, Ethan. I hope you know that." He looked down at his hands. "I don't know if I'm kind. I just couldn't leave you alone out there." "That is kindness," she said simply. Another quiet moment passed between them. A warm, peaceful moment. As the night grew deeper, Tala rested again. Ethan sat by the dim lamp, thinking about everything that had happened in the last 2 days. Life had brought someone unexpected into his world and changed something inside him. The next morning came, brighter and clearer. Tala could walk a little more steadily. With each step, her confidence returned. By the 3rd day, she was ready to leave. Though her leg was still wrapped carefully, Ethan had prepared a small bag of herbs, food, and clean cloth for her. "You'll need this for the journey," he said, handing it to her. She took it with gratitude. "I will never forget what you did for me." Ethan walked with her outside. The land spread out before them, full of open paths and endless sky. Tala turned to him. "One last time. You saved my life," she said. "If ever you need help, if ever you feel alone, come to the hills near the cedar trees. My people will welcome you." Ethan nodded slowly. "Thank you." They stood quietly for a moment. No words could fully express the strange but powerful connection that had grown between them. Finally, Tala gave him a soft smile. "Goodbye, Ethan." "Goodbye, Tala." She began her journey back home, walking with strength and dignity. Ethan watched her until she became a small figure against the vast land. A part of him felt sad to see her go, but another part felt lighter. He had done something good. He had helped someone brave, a woman who carried courage in her spirit, and he knew their paths had crossed for a reason. As he walked back into his cabin, the world around him felt changed, warmer, brighter, and full of meaning. His quiet ranch no longer felt like a lonely place. It felt like a place where something important had happened, something that would stay in his heart for a long, long time.